Hey guys, so for today's summative, we're going to be working with Photopea. We're going to be working with layer adjustments, which we've done once before, but we worked with something called the hue and saturation layer adjustment. Today we're going to work with something called a selective color layer adjustment. And that's going to allow us to bring multiple images from different photographs into one scene and really make it look cohesive and like it belongs there. And it's a big trick of the trade to kind of manipulate photos this way. So let's begin. First thing you want to do is download the PSD document shared with you on Google Classroom and open it up in Photopea. It's going to look blank. It's not blank, okay? First thing you want to do when you open up this file is choose a background. So here on the right, you see your layers panel. You should open this up and you have Forest 2 or Forest 1. It's up to you which one you choose. Once you've chosen one, you can kind of close this back up, okay? Now, if you notice, the two forest images you've been given have very different tones. One is much more yellowy green, the other one's much more red and darker. Now, they're both going to have a different vibe, and your job is to match the animals you select to the vibe of the photograph, so it looks like they belong there. The next thing we're going to do is open up our animal options layer, and you'll see that you have quite a few options here. You're going to choose an animal, and you're going to select out the animal. Now, this is where most of your time is going to be spent today, making a good selection. Now, the selection tools you choose are up to you. You can use the pen tool as a selection tool if you really like it. Just remember, when you use the pen tool, you have to change the setting up here to path before you start making your pen tool. Or you can use any of the other selection tools we learned in class. Be sure you are activated on the actual layer you want to select and that you're being picky about your selection tools. So you're not going to just have a one and done selection for almost anything in here. You're going to have to spend a few minutes making a good selection. I would also recommend zooming in to make sure that your selection is correct. Now, I will warn you, because most of these animals have fur or hair, you're not going to get a perfect selection around the edges. There are some things that might help you out. Something called Refine Edge up here. You can go into another dialog box and clean it up, but just try your best to get as much of the fur or the hair as you can. If a selection tool is not working well for you and you keep trying, swap to another one or mix and match them. I started off with the object selection, swapped to the lasso, and cleaned it up. That's very typical. Now, the next thing we want to do is add a mask, because we want everything we do today to be non-destructive. So if we remember, our mask is down here. It looks like the Japanese flag. I have my layer selected, I have my selection, and now I can hit a mask, and that should hide everything outside the animal I selected. Now, I don't want to have to select this again to do my next effect, but we've gone over a trick before to reactivate a layer. And to do that, you hold down Command on your keyboard, and you hover your mouse over the thumbnail of your layer. So you see I have my owl, this little black box here where I just made my selection. If I hold down Command and click, what should happen is, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to deselect intentionally. Command and click. It reselected my owl. So I don't have to draw another selection. Okay? Now comes the part where we really worry about color. We have another selection made. We're going to add an adjustment layer. The adjustment layer is on the bottom here. It looks like a half circle, the half black and white cookie. We're going to hit selective color this time. Selective color is going to bring us a dialog box on its own. It's going to show us properties. And you're going to see quite a few things that you can edit. First, colors. These are all the colors you can focus on. You have to think about what the color of the actual thing is to start with, right? If your original object is red, you might want to work in the reds. If your original object is green, you work in the greens. Mine is fairly neutral, right? It has some browns and whites, so I might want to stick with neutral to start with. Each one of these colors allows you to change the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black percentage in the image. So in my neutral colors, I can tone down how much cyan there is. And you'll see right away it starts to change my image, right? This image has quite a bit of cyan, so I'm going to bring it up. And already my owl looks a little bit more cohesive with the scene. Now I can kind of play around with the magenta if I want him to have a little bit of redness, just like these trees have a lot of redness. Maybe I want to tone down the yellow or bring it up. And again, a lot of times you'll know by actually just making the sliders move and seeing how it looks, seeing how it works with the scene. And I think my images here is pretty dark, so I'm going to bring up the black percentage. Then maybe I'll go into the whites and also bring up some of the magenta, because there's a little bit of white in his feathers. Make it a little darker. And lastly, I'll go into the blacks and do the same. And now, once I'm pretty happy with it, I can hide my properties by clicking on PRO. And I can kind of see a before and after, and you can really see what this has done. I'm going to hide this selective color. So we'll have two layers, right? We have my owl layer with the mask, and then we have my adjustment layer right on top with another mask. And I'm just going to hide this. And you're going to see before and after, my owl looks much more like it belongs in the scene than it did before. Now once I'm happy, I want to deselect, right? I also want to move this, but here's what happens if I go to move just this layer. Notice my owl doesn't move just because my selective color layer moved. And remember, it's separate. So we can do something to move them together if we'd like. We can select both by holding shift. We can hit this little link on the bottom. It just links layers together, which means now every time I try to move the owl, everything will move. Just something for you to note. And I can shrink everything at the same time, hold shift to keep it in perspective. And I can decide where I want my owl to be hanging out for the day. Maybe I want him on this branch here, so I'll shrink him down just a little bit more. And now I have an owl that looks a lot better than this owl would have in this scene. Now this is something you're going to repeat quite a few times, but we're going to ask as soon as you make your first selection and add a mask for your first check-in, just to ensure that you understand what today's task is. Now if you are an underclassman, we're going to ask you for 3 animals to be laid out in your scene with this effect. If you are an upperclassman, we're going to ask for 6 because you should know your selection tools a little bit more. Now lastly, when you go to export this, we're going to ask you to export as a JPEG, but we're also going to ask for a screenshot or proof of your layers panel. This is going to help us know if you did this correctly. Now because this is a summative, please be precise, be detailed, and use your layer mask and your adjustment layers. Good luck.